Welcome back, and we're glad you're here because we have a TREAT for you today. If you caught our SUPERZOO episode, which we've linked in the show notes here, you'll know BSM Partners recently attended one of the largest pet industry trade shows in North America. But we didn't just attend. We set up a soundproof podcasting booth right there on the show floor and conducted 27 interviews with brands, influencers, and other movers and shakers across the pet care world. We collected 12 hours of recordings in that booth, and some of the conversations were just too juicy not to share. So today we're kicking off a mini-series of candid conversations from the SUPERZOO show floor, highlighting some meaty perspectives, hot takes, and spicy sound bites that ask the tough questions about the way we feed and care for our pets. Today, we'll share our conversation with Daniel Schulof, founder and CEO of Keto Natural Pet Foods, a company breaking the kibble mold to create low-carb, protein-first diets for dogs. He's also the author of Dogs, Dog Food, and Dogma, in which he investigates the canine obesity epidemic, arguing that carbohydrate-heavy commercial diets are contributing to rising rates of certain diseases in dogs. And it's not Dan's first time on the podcast either. His story is a key part of the DCM scandal, which we've uncovered in several past episodes, the latest of which we've included in today's show notes. This interview, though, will cover a few things. One will be carbs, one of the most debated and misunderstood areas of pet nutrition. We'll also highlight upcoming changes to the way pet foods are labeled, detail what those changes mean for pets and their people, and explore the complicated relationship between science, emotion, and misinformation in the pet food space. Get ready, because we're pulling no punches.
Welcome to Barking Mad, a podcast by BSM Partners. We're your hosts, Dr. Stephanie Clark.
And I'm Jordan Tyler. Okay, so some brief background to set the stage for this first piece of the conversation. In 2023, the Association of American Feed Control Officials, or AAFCO, which is made up of state and federal regulatory officials that set guidelines for pet food formulation and labeling in the United States, approved a long-awaited project they called Pet Food Label Modernization, or PFLM. The goal here is to add more transparency, consistency, and clarity to pet food labels in order to help pet parents make more informed decisions about the products they buy for and feed to their pets. And there are several changes involved in this. And we've linked an article in the show notes that explains more about each change in turn. But for the purpose of today's conversation, we'll focus on one specific update, which we'll see on the backs of pet food bags, cans, and pouches. This is the change from a guaranteed analysis panel to what will soon be called a pet nutrition facts box. Let's dig in.
The issue is that AAFCO, the organization that is kind of the one that matters when it comes to setting requirements for how pet food has to be labeled in the United States, has recently announced a big change to what they're going to be requiring. I say it in future tense because it's like, they actually aren't really requiring it until 2030, but when they start requiring it, it's a big change. What they require now when it comes to quantitative nutritional content, so describing in numbers terms what nutrients are in a food product, is called the Guaranteed Analysis Panel. I'm sure like many of your listeners know what that is already. They're familiar with it because they've shopped in this world or made products, whatever. What they will be requiring is called the Pet Nutrition Facts Panel. They're different in some really important and very significant ways. They ought to be things that change the industry and change a lot about companion animal public health, in my estimation, at least. Most notably, the big change that I am super excited about is the change from not requiring brands to disclose the carbohydrate content of their recipes, their products, to one in which not only do they have to disclose the total carbohydrate content, but just like in human foods, you have to describe there are lots of kinds of carbohydrates. And so you have to just say total carbohydrate plus fiber, you have to say sugar, you have to say, and there's line items, like subcategories of carbohydrate that are required, which is very similar. And more generally, the whole pet nutrition facts is very similar to how the FDA requires makers of packaged foods for human consumption to label their products. The existing regime, the Guaranteed Analysis Panel, doesn't require carbohydrate disclosures. And as a result, consumers don't know how much carbohydrate is in their product. And as a result, they end up feeding a lot of it to their pets. And because I have spent past 15 years in one way or another trying to help people understand and deal with the fact that most pet foods are crammed full of carbohydrate, I'm very excited about it. And I think it ought to have positive ramifications. But you think about companion animal public health, for lack of a better veterinary public health, like there's no real field for it at this point, so it doesn't have a name, as far as I know, at least.
Yeah.
You guys know something I don't know. But like, okay, what issues, top of your head, what are the most important issues that we can think of for U.S. companion animal public health or companion animal veterinary public health?
Obesity.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah, obesity for sure. Diabetes.
Diabetes.
You've got joint issues and skin.
Joint issues. Yeah. So joint and skin, to me, I'm always at least like, well, where do these show up in terms of like in the utilitarian calculation? Like, are these things killing dogs? Like, no, they're not killing them, but they're still maybe making life painful.
Yeah.
They're not insignificant things. Cancer would be the only other one that I think of as being, it's like, but it's very different from, it's not a nutritional issue. Nutritionally mediated stuff, I'm like on the same page as you guys. It's like obesity, diabetes, cancer, chronic joint conditions. Those are kind of the four things where it's like, how are we still screwing this up so bad? And, carbohydrate intake is very central to, for sure, inarguably, diabetes and obesity alone. And in all likelihood, if we were having this conversation 15 years from now, you'd be saying the same thing about cancer and arthritis, I believe, because there's lots of early stage stuff on that front that's like also compelling. And so to me, you want to help animals, you want to make that system better, you deal with those things first. And you've got a thing right at the heart of that, which is excessive intake of carbohydrate. Can you fix that? You can really, really move the needle on companion animal public health in the U.S. And so, that's why it's the issue for me.
So do you think having to disclose that it's going to kind of force brands to either reduce the amount of carbs, or do you think it's just going to educate pet owners?
I think that over time, you will see brands reacting to the disclosure requirement by reducing the amount of carbohydrate in many of their products, at least. One of the reasons the carbohydrate is the backbone of the modern pet food ecosystem is because calorie for calorie, carbohydrates are they're the cheap nutrient.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Agriculture-based carbohydrate, 1/10 the cost of animal-based protein, like very much cheaper. So consumers, if dog eats a donut or something, it pulls the calories out of it. It can digest that stuff. It can pull calories out of it. And in some ways, if you mix it with enough of the other stuff, it'll keep it alive. And so there are some consumers who are surely going to be so wed to the price points that they've grown accustomed to that are grounded in, 70% carbohydrate products, that they're still going to want a product like that. Even understanding they're still 75 years on from the Surgeon General's report on lung cancer and smoking. There are millions of people that smoke cigarettes. There's literally zero cancer nicotine delivery strategies now, and still millions and millions and millions of people smoke. So it's like people are going to do it. And so there are going to be brands that are going to be there that are going to serve that. But I generally think that when that information is more broadly available, it's going to impact some consumer decision making. And then how much it impacts is all down to education and other sorts of like who's motivated to help people understand the reality about what those things do to health. Do those folks win those kind of information wars or not? That's like what it boils down to, I think, in terms of how widely it changes things.
Yeah.
What these new disclosure requirements do is they make pet food labeling a lot more like human food labeling, right?
Right.
And if you go to the grocery store and you look at human packaged foods, you go to like the pasta aisle or the cereal aisle or the pancake mix aisle, it's still mostly full carbohydrate options. Like that's still the bulk of the products there. But even in those traditionally carbohydrate focused industry like types of foods, you now have whole subsectors that are like, for the people that are diehard, that are like, I don't eat this way in anything. I'm just like, I still want to eat my pancakes, but I'm not going to eat the high carb one.
Right.
There's options for those kind of people. In addition to people just getting rid of, you've probably read plenty about how industries like full sugar soda have really suffered as the public has become more aware of the nutritional science that shows how bad sugar is. And so like people move away from categories of products too, but some combination of those two things, I like to think will reduce the amount of carbohydrate in the overall pet food environment.
Cutting in real quick, carbohydrates get a bad rap in pet food for sure. And Daniel offers some compelling points to justify his take. But I do think it's important to understand, while our dogs and cats may not necessarily require carbohydrates as part of their diet, carbs like corn, soy, wheat, starches, etc. are required for the extrusion process, which is how kibble is made. So from a processing standpoint, in order to create that brown and round goodness, you do need to have some level of carbohydrates to move that diet through an extruder. When kibble is made, all the ingredients are mixed together and pushed through an extruder, which cooks the diet using heat and pressure. Carbohydrates contain starch, which turns soft and sticky when they get hot. That sticky stuff acts kind of like the glue of the formula. It holds everything together and makes the food puff up like popcorn when it comes out on the other end of the machine. Without those carbs, the kibble would just crumble apart or come out all flat and weird looking. So, all that's to say, the processing piece is a big reason why carbs are in kibble in the first place. But to Daniel's point, his company makes kibble. So, we know it is possible to make kibble with a lower carbohydrate content. But because brands have historically not had to disclose carbohydrates on the label, and because those ingredients are so cheap, you can see where I'm going here. Follow the money, people.
So, I mean, you had mentioned it, like, it's similar to human labels. Do you think more people will understand that? By all means, it's cool because you get to see more carbs, it's a little bit more transparency, but is it really helping the owner?
I mean, I believe the only question is how many. There are, I can tell you from surveying we've done, there are all sorts of the average pet food consumer misunderstands how much carbohydrate is in their product by a large margin. And so you're going to change people's understanding of the nutritional content of their animal's diet. The question is, I mean, are you talking about 9 out of 10 people? No.
You're right.
Are you talking about 1 out of 10 people? No. Somewhere in the middle. And some you make positive improvement, things take time.
Yeah.
Like to again go back to smoking, the Surgeon General's report on lung cancer and smoking came out in the mid-1950s. Like that is the top medical person in the United States, government top doctor, right? Putting out a report that is singularly focused on one issue. This causes this. Boom. Done. No nuance about it. Smoking rates didn't even begin to decline for 2 decades after that. 20 years. It's like these things take time, and changing people's perspectives about it is not as simple as like, there are a lot of things where you just look at an image and all of a sudden you can't deny it anymore. Oh, this is real. I saw the image. I can no longer believe that.
Yeah.
That's not how nutritional science stuff works.
No.
It has to sift through systems and it takes forever. But yeah, it's going to have a major change. I mean, I can tell you right now, like one of the things I do is own a company that makes low carb dog food. We make kibble, it's 5% digestible carbohydrate because I believe all these things. And one of the things that makes it hard to sell products like that in the US right now is I'm competing with brands that are suggesting to their consumers that their products are similar to ours.
Yeah.
But because they don't have to disclose the carbohydrate content, they can mislead.
Yeah.
It's like absurd. It's more than that. It's like under Africa's existing regulatory, did you know this? Under their existing system, you can't use the expression low carbohydrate, low carb, or low starch. So like I make low carb pet food. That's our shtick. That's our thing. I can't tell people that.
Why?
And because you have a prohibition on using the expression low carbohydrate.
Yeah.
But where does that stem from?
So, I mean, I could tell you.
I'm going to say, all I know is it's in the AFCO book. So
sorry, we're going to go down this rabbit.
That's the rule. Where does the rule come from? The on the record answer is that not for me, but I mean, like if you were to ask somebody at AFCO, what they will tell you is essentially that AFCO's whole regulatory system came from a time when it was regulating in a very similar way companion animal food and livestock food. And it was kind of like we were trying to make sure, AFCO was trying to make sure that the snake oil salesmen of the day weren't putting out foods that weren't even nutritionally sufficient for those animals. They were going to sell Dan's snake oil dog food and have a wolf on the bag, but really it was 99% carbohydrate. And it's like they came along to say, like, no, a dog needs to have this minimum. It's like a lot of AFCOs is framed up in minimums, that kind of thing. And so that's the guarantee analysis reflects that, right? It's got all the minimum requirements. But a dog and a cat don't have a nutritional requirement for carbohydrate. And so it's not on, that's like how AFCO has sort of, for decades, dragged its feet on requiring carbohydrate disclosures because it's still sort of operating out of this world in which it was like, we got to tell people the minimum to make sure people aren't getting misled in that way. There's no requirement for carbohydrate content. Therefore, there's no, like they've sort of taken that to say like, well, then because there's not that, we can't really say what's low and what isn't. So because it's going to be, you're going to have people who are going to abuse this system, you just can't use the term at all.
That's kind of wild. Like, I never knew. And another thing, we're seeing a ton of vet formulated diets, but something I've heard you talk about in the past, Steph, is how some vets have historically relied on one peer-reviewed paper that says puppies need 20% carbohydrates in their diet. And they use that basis to formulate all their dog foods. But like it's only one study. It's not enough to draw conclusions for the entire population of dogs. And while dogs don't necessarily have a requirement for carbs, you could make the argument that they do need glucose on some level in their diet. But there are other ways to get glucose other than through carbs. So like there's just so much more nuance to it than appears at face value.
Yeah, the devil is in the details.
Right.
So much stuff.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
misinformation.
Right.
It's such a broad phenomenon in the age in which we live that it gets studied a lot now. It's like, how are we all as a society going to deal with this? There's, people who that's their academic thing is they're a professor at a major university and they study misinformation now. That's how common it is.
Yeah.
And these dynamics get, generalized and then get applicable or not applicable in your little domains like pet food. And one of the things that is like a kind of generalized principle is that like there's in the veterinary world, the amount of like veterinary nutrition research that gets published every year, the number of studies that get conducted, the amount of dollars spent, whatever metric you want to use, it's not even fair to call it a drop in the bucket compared to the human equivalent. It is absolutely minuscule,
Yeah.
very, very small. We're teaching veterinarians in the same way that we teach anybody in any kind of scientific discipline, right? Which is like you go look at the evidence, you draw opinions based on the evidence. When you have such a smaller record with so much less information in it, you end up doing something on a systematic basis. You over-index limited findings and you over-index characterizations of those limited findings. And what you flag, Steph, is a really good example of that. It's like a single study, like somebody characterized, it's like, this is what we've seen happen for the past, I don't know, whatever it's been now, 8 years with DCM is like,
Yeah.
How does it work? Well, this, bad things happen.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay. But because we don't have because there are fewer than 100 board certified veterinary nutritionists in the United States today, we don't have enough of a body of information to use the same kind of decision-making and kind of like intellectual approach that works in domains where there are thousands of participants and lots of research money going into it.
No, it's like what you mentioned with like, grain-free and DCM. It's like they lock onto this one paper or this one conclusion that is their belief. And it's like, can you replicate that? Yeah, okay, bad things happen. What are those bad things? But like if you repeat that study today, what would you find?
Yeah.
Well, you don't know because you only have one paper.
No, exactly. It should like that example really shows how important in that system the characterization of the scientific findings is. And in veterinary world, how vets are educated about nutritional topics is one of the Swiss watches. Evil genius Swiss watch, but it's a Swiss watch. a limited number of largest industry participants have done a tremendous job of making sure that how vets are taught about nutrition is consistent with what's good for their business. I don't know other industries like I know pet food, but I'm a reasonably well-read person, and there's nothing remotely close to it.
They're going to pick that hill to die on, and they're going to die on it. And so even if other research comes out and it maybe says, hey, carbs, we don't really need them. We don't need 20%.
I mean, like the 2 studies that we put out this year in which we completely destroyed the standard of care for diabetes in this country, with like the #1 prescribed formula for dogs with diabetes. We tested head to head, how did dogs' metabolism look on our diets, whereas Tiny Startup, 60% lower blood sugar than the standard of care prescription-only diet. They employ more veterinary nutritionists than any organization in the history of planet Earth. I'm a $3 million company I'm a guy. Like, that's not, like, what?
And they're going to die on that hill.
Yeah, exactly.
And the crazy thing about like the diabetes, not to like circle back, but when I worked in a clinic, it's a death sentence because owners don't want to give insulin. They don't want to prick their dog's ear or paw every morning.
Yep.
And so the amount of dogs that die from the diabetes diagnosis instead of just
getting it managed.
Yeah. Nutritionally managing this nutritional disease.
Yeah, insane. Diabetes in dogs was like measles in people not long ago. Like, one of the ways in which the nutritional science record is deficient in doggy world is like prevalence data.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as good. People, you can go find right away. CDC is keeping track of diabetes rates in the U.S. You can look at the trends. It doesn't exist on the same kind of level, but all indications to the extent there is data, Banfield keeps some of the data, and there's some amount of prevalence studies. It's rising.
Oh, yeah.
It's clearly rising.
Cutting in again, because I wish I could debunk this one for y'all, but it's unfortunately true. In 2016, Banfield Pet Hospital released its State of Pet Health report, and inside that report is pretty much a smoking gun to confirm Dan's point here. In 2011, Banfield reported a 32% increase in canine diabetes since 2006, so about over a 5-year period. Between 2006 and 2016, so over the next 10 years, Banfield saw canine diabetes rates increase by nearly 80%. So if you break that down and assume this trend has continued since 2016, doggy diabetes rates have been steadily rising over the last 20 years. And when a health problem keeps getting worse despite advances in science and medicine and diagnostic tools, it raises a tough question. What information are we missing or misunderstanding along the way? This brings us to the second part of today's conversation, the rising tide of misinformation. It's everywhere, for everything, and pet nutrition is no exception. Whether it's outdated guidelines, over-reliance on a single study, or the lack of robust veterinary nutrition research, pet parents and even professionals don't always have the full picture. And when that happens, myths get repeated so often that they start to sound like facts. To find out just how widespread this problem really is, Dan and his team decided to test the theory by surveying everyday dog owners and veterinary professionals to measure what they truly know about some of the more black and white aspects of pet nutrition science. Let's hear about it.
One of the things I've been working on for the past 6-7 months is I engaged in survey work that is designed to test in many ways, like the broad, generally the quality of people's level of understanding of the veterinary nutrition scientific record. And what we did is we impaneled hundreds of everyday dog owners, nice broad subset of folks that are just, we have a dog and otherwise we look like normal Americans. The other one is veterinary professionals, veterinarians, and what do you call the people that are
vet techs? Yeah.
Put together a survey with dozens of questions on it that's like, they're all there's a correct and an incorrect answer to this stuff because it's very tight. I used to be a lawyer, and so you draft it very tight. It's just like, you can't deny there's been one study that shows this or 0 studies that show that. It doesn't exist. And so there's a clear yes or no answer. And we asked everybody, we gave them the same surveys. Both groups did poorly, as you might expect. A lot of bad information in both groups. Worse, though, considerably worse in the vet community than in the lay public community. What I'm hopeful is that by publishing that stuff and promoting those findings, you can help the public and maybe start to say, like, look, this is the reality I have to contend with. This is, when I go to the vet, this is a person that doesn't understand as much about these topics as I do. And I think that's sort of like, there are only so many things you can do to try to change the situation, but I'm kind of bullish on that one.
So let's pull this all together. We've learned that carbohydrates, while not required nutritionally for dogs and cats, do play a key role in kibble production. But considering rising rates of pet obesity and the diseases that stem from it, we may want to go back to the science and reconsider. We've also heard how AAFCO's new labeling requirements could shine a brighter light on carbohydrate content, making it harder for brands to hide behind vague panels and easier for pet parents to make more informed choices. Dan's made it clear that transparency can drive industry change, even if it doesn't happen overnight. And Stephanie underscored how limited veterinary nutrition research can leave room for over-reliance on not enough data, shaping recommendations that may not tell the whole story. The bottom line, pet parents deserve clear information and better options. And the only way forward is to keep asking the hard questions. Because at the end of the day, your pet's long-term health deserves more than business as usual. Well, Dan, I always learn something when we chat. So thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks for talking with me.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me in the booth.
Thank you.
Just so everybody that's listening understands what's happening right now, I'm in a booth on the floor of SUPERZOO, which is this huge conference. So it's like this. Las Vegas today in mid-July, it's 140 degrees or something like that if you go outside the Mandalay Bay Hotel. Once you walk into the Mandalay Bay Hotel, there is an incredible air conditioning system that brings the temperature to probably 65 degrees. Then you go in another layer into the recording booth that BSM Partners has set up for the Barking Mad podcast, and the temperature immediately goes back up to 140 degrees. And so the three of us have been sitting in this 140-degree hothouse talking about dog nutritional stuff for you, the listener.
Yes.
And you better appreciate the hard work that Jordan and Stephanie are putting in, because they're grinding.
It's part of our it's like a psychological game. It's like, how hot can we make this thing? And, how spicy can we get the conversation?
Yeah. I hope we delivered.
If you haven't yet, go check out our SUPERZOO 2025 episode, which we've linked in the show notes. It's a great way to learn more about the show, the industry, and hear from more of the folks we interviewed there. We're still early in bringing you these conversations, so stay tuned for more candid conversations and insights from the SUPERZOO 2025 show floor.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Barking Mad. If you want to learn more about BSM Partners, please visit us at bsmpartners.net. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite leading podcast platform or share it with a friend to stay current on the latest pet industry trends and conversations.
A huge thank you to Dan Schulof for joining us, and to Dr. Stephanie Clark for her always insightful perspective. We'd also like to thank our dedicated team, Adamiette Thomas, Neely Bowden, Kate Wright, Katie Wolf, and Dr. Katie Miller. A special shout out to Leanne Haggerty and Michael Johnson in support of this episode, and to David Perez for our original music in the intro and outro. See you next time.